Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Lizard Comedy Profiles. Today we are joined by the magnificent William Stone, who you may have seen on our show back in January. I think he last did it. Interesting little fact about that actually, because my dad watches these shows after they've been broadcast, and he made a very clear point to say that you were his absolute favourite. On that stream, which is good, but also I do them every month, and he's never said that about me. So,
yeah, everyone's dad loves me apart from my own. That's the thing, you know. So
yeah, exactly. Well, that's fine. We can swap.
I'll start on a high for you, Johnny, just to get the tone right, you know.
That's absolutely fine. I had a much bleaker joke planned for that, which I'm not going to say, but we can. But yeah, so William Stone is an absolutely fantastic comedian. If you've had the pleasure to see him, he is fantastic. If you've not had the pleasure to see him as well, but you wouldn't know that. So do go and check him out when you can. I'll pop all his links in the Twitch chat if you want to go have a look. Ideally after the show, but I mean, if we start boring you, you can just go and watch prepared comedy. That's always an option. But yes, so thank you for coming on the show. How are you doing, first of all? I'm
all right. Cheers for having me, first of all. I'm all right. I've been gigging quite a lot. It's good to be back on the horse, as they say.
How are you finding that after like so long away from live stages?
I'll be honest, like it's me for the first few gigs back, it was just amazing because I don't think I realised how much I missed it, and two, I've said this a few times, but I think when you're gigging like just all the time, you kind of can't see the wood for the trees, and you're worrying about all this industry stuff and what that person's doing and what that person's doing, and then just being away from it for so long and then doing it, I just found the joy in just being on stage again. Like if not more than I ever had before. So I've been trying to just like enjoy it.
Yeah, I suppose like pre-pandemic, I guess there's a danger, particularly if you're gigging. Like I never had this problem because I only gig like once or twice a month. But I imagine if you're traveling around doing a lot, it can just. I mean, it just feels like a kind of routine job, which I suppose it is. But I guess like having so long away from it, like upwards of 18 months, depending on whether you got any gigs in last summer. I guess I don't know. I guess that's. Because I find like whenever I do take breaks for whatever reason, it is really cathartic coming back into it and sort of like reconnecting with the form and like you say, remembering how much you miss it and how much you like doing it. So I get it must be. I don't know if that would be any different from sort of being forced by other people to stop gigging rather than of your own agency. But yeah, I can imagine that being very weird. Did you find it particularly nerve-wracking when you came back, or was it like muscle memory? Did you get back into it very easily?
I think I was a bit nervous, but not any more than I normally was. But it was a big-ish gig, so I was a bit like, I hope I don't suck because I've not done it for a while.
Yeah.
But there's this sort of, I think it's still kind of going on. There's an almost honeymoon period at the moment between acts and audience where everyone's just enjoying being out and doing stuff. So they seem to be a lot more like up for it and a lot more forgiving, I think. So I hope it lasts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wonder if there's been a boom in people going out to live comedy after this. Like,
I think so.
Yeah,
because like the Brighton Fringe is sometimes a bit hit and miss, but like, you know, with all due respect, they put a lot of work in and stuff. But I think it's kind of like, before I started doing comedy, I didn't know it was even a thing. And
I'd never heard of it before, and yeah.
So, but this year, and to be fair, a couple of years before, it really has started to have a lot more traction. And this year, like, I was doing a lot of the late shows at the Warren, which is like kind of like, if you know Edinburgh, kind of like the Brighton version of like Underbelly or something. So it's like promote. And they were selling out like nearly every night. Whereas when I've done it in the past, they used to just sort of like give out a few free tickets to fill it up and stuff. So it was full, but they'd have to kind of like, you know,
coerce
give some but this year it's just been like booked up. So it's I think broadly speaking, it's made people a lot more appreciative of just like being out and doing things, you know, and making the most of the evenings and stuff.
Definitely, because I guess if you live in an area where there is lots of comedy on, like, I mean, I'm not sure what the kind of overall scene's like in Brighton, but particularly like in London where there's like an open mic every pub, or even in Manchester where there's like two purpose-built clubs and a few kind of more alternative but still kind of well-known nights around. I guess just being surrounded by it, all that, being able to go to it at any point. Like I'm definitely guilty of. I can't think of the last time I went to see stand-up comedy that wasn't at a gig that I was at.
I know what you mean, yeah.
And which is because in my early days, I absolutely loved it. Like I would just go along to gigs, even like open mics sometimes before I realised how shit all the acts were. I used to go, I used to go a lot just to kind of be around other creatives, as it were, and
you sort of You want to sort of submerge yourself in it when you're new, don't you? I think, yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, or even just in a kind of like. In a kind of writer's rut, sometimes I'll just go and see whoever's on at Excess Malarkey or Trapdoor or whatever clubs are in your kind of local area. Yeah, I'd always make an effort to just kind of go to that, and then afterwards, even if I didn't particularly enjoy those particular acts, I'd feel a bit more kind of inspired, and kind of just being in that room with that kind of atmosphere. It's the same atmosphere you kind of get before going on stage, I think, but without the pressure of having to go on stage. So because I don't know about you, but I definitely find I mean, and we'll get into this proper in a bit, but because I don't really have a proper writing process as such, I do just tend to kind of get ideas and try and latch onto them when they arrive. And I think apart from when I'm trying to do other work, which is the time I come up with most of my ideas, like my most productive writing happens like half an hour before I'm going on stage, just because my brain's, I guess, kind of associated that atmosphere with it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think I have a similar thing to that. Yeah. Not necessarily just before I go on stage. Well, it does happen sometimes. Yeah. And then it gives me this weird anxiety where, like, I should try it. I should have the confidence to just try it. Yeah. But then the doubting side of my brain is like, no, wait till you've written it properly and yeah. But yeah, I tend to get ideas when I'm on the way to or from gigs.
Commuting as well. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's because, I mean, I'm always on my phone or on my computer or I'm working or whatever. I've got a very like busy brain. I think it's sort of like a side effect of being anxious. So when I'm on the train, it's kind of the only time when I'm just like being, in a way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I mean,
that's when the ideas seem to come.
Yeah, because I suppose you're kind of commuting, like you there's not much else you can be doing, so your brain has to kind of relax and being like, well, I can't do anything now, so I might as well just wind down. I definitely feel that.
And you're seeing people walking by, you're seeing things out the window, you know. So whereas, like, I mean, I work from home, so I think a lot of people probably not. I don't know. I think some comedians certainly get ideas from like their job or their commute or whatever. But most of the time, I'm at home, so I work from home. So I'm not getting a lot of ideas from my wall on my computer screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it seems to be when I'm gigging that I get my ideas. And also, I mean, it sounds like dicey, but like when you hear someone's joke and you think they're going to go a certain way and they don't, it's like, oh, that gives me an idea for a joke.
Oh,
not,
God,
like,
yeah.
Obviously, not copying it, but like, it can be like, oh, I thought they were going to make this out of it. And then, you know, that can give you an idea, even if it's just the mechanisms. Like, oh, I thought they would have gone this way. Yeah. And you can apply that mechanism to a different concept or something, you know. Yeah, absolutely, because you do. I mean, I don't know if you find this, but like, particularly, I've not even just after I started comedy, when I was watching a lot of when you watch a lot of comedy, your brain is trying to, like, is subconsciously trying to predict what the punchline's going to be a lot of the time, particularly more kind of traditional joke-based sets, like sort of when it's kind of anecdotal stories, a bit less so, because you don't have that same connection. But yeah, like nothing is more satisfying watching live comedy than when you think you've worked out what the joke's going to be and they completely just curve that in the other direction. So yeah, I get that. It's I don't want to say inspiring, but like it does kind of it kind of kicks your brain into action, going like, oh well, yeah, no, it opens your mind to different ways you could. Maybe you've got a joke that you haven't worked out how to take, like and it kind of gives you, oh wait, I was thinking of trying to take it this way, but maybe I could try a different way. I think it was Kiri Pritchard McLean once. And I don't know if this is her advice or something that someone else told her, but
yeah, one of the things I remember her saying was that there's like kind of three levels of punchline. So you've got like your A punchline, which is the kind of first thing you think of. You've got your B punchline, which is a bit more out of the way, and then you've got the C punchline, which is even further out of the way. And you want to try and aim for those B's and C's because everyone's just going to kind of predict the A's. And like a few of them sprinkled in is fine.
I think I'd heard a similar thing.
Yeah. I definitely explained that very badly, but you got the gist of it. Yeah.
No, you definitely explained it well because I knew what you meant, and it made me think of the other one I heard. Yeah. But yeah, so I think it was like the first idea is the idea that everyone has.
That's it, yeah.
The second idea is the idea that other comedians have, and the third idea is your idea, sort of thing, right?
That was it, yep.
But sometimes, like you say, so it's interesting because you can play with. I like to sometimes do a joke where I'm really, really, really signposting the punchline and then not delivering it, which is part masochism and part like I like alternative comedy, but I like the discomfort and the kind of weird feeling around dissatisfaction, and I find that funny.
Yeah.
But not for the sake of just annoying people, but like so there's a couple of jokes I do where it's set up like a traditional joke and then the ending is really literal, so that is what's funny about it. But if there's too much like that, then it can leave the audience like, well, you're kind of not really doing comedy, you're doing, well, I guess I'm describing anti-comedy in a way, which I do love. But I like to try and be as broad as possible in a positive way, that not like I want everyone to like what I do, because I think it is not for everyone necessarily.
No.
But what I mean is I don't want to in any way exclude people by having this sort of like elitist or like snobbish way of making jokes that requires some sort of like incredible comedy history knowledge.
Exactly.
I like the experience to be funny, and if I have to do something a bit anti-comedy to make it funny, that's fine. But I'm not, because there are like certain types of anti-comedy that it is just a bit like a nudge and a wink to people that get it, and I feel like that's a bit sort of elitist almost. But
yeah, I feel that, and I feel like a lot of new comedians definitely fall into that. I certainly did, and arguably still do, depending on who you ask. But there's the whole it's that whole trope of I mean, I don't know how relevant it is now, but certainly in like the early 2010s of every new comedian trying to be Stuart Lee. Whereas now it would be every comedian trying to be like James Acaster or someone like that, which is a similar kind of. Although I think one is a bit more accessible than someone like Stuart Lee. It's that same kind of trap that I think a lot of New Yorkers fall into.
Yeah, but I think it's good as long as it doesn't become a trap, because I think in every dare I say, let's just say creative pursuit rather than art form. Yeah. I think the first stage of that is always imitation, I think, and that's fine, because that's how you learn the language, the rhythm.
Yeah.
And then it's a case of like just then finding your own way, and rather than like, I think the way I look at it is, you don't want to be the next someone, you want to be the first someone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you don't want to be the next James Acaster, you want to be the first Jonny Collins.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, I had a really good chat with Katie Mitchell a couple of weeks ago about just this, because we're like both people who get compared to Andrew O'Neill a lot because of how we talk and our general kind of styles. And yeah, we had like sort of talking about how difficult it is to kind of work out what you're going to be the first of, as you're saying, like it's very but I think it just kind of worked out that the way you do that isn't by like beating yourself up trying to be the most original person. It's just by expanding your influences and meshing them in together in a way that hasn't been done before, which is sort of kind of pseudo-ish process to originality. Is just diluting all your influences until they're not there anymore.
Well, yeah, and I think also what do I think? Can't remember what I was going to say. It's a human sort of like tendency to categorize things, isn't it? It happens with everything. It's like, that's like this.
Yeah.
Because it's just how people relate to the world. It's like, if you've not experienced the flavour before, you'll say, it's like orange and chocolate. Like, you know what I mean? So
yeah, exactly.
It's just, and people just like, they do that. And I think that's fine. But yeah, it's interesting. I think that a lot of the comedy I like what I do is not really that much like what I like. And there's no way of saying this without sounding wanky, but like all my favourite comedy and music and stuff is stuff that's kind of like, what genre is that? You know what I mean? Like, what is that? They are just their own thing.
Yeah,
and like,
I get that.
I love like the kind of nuts and bolts of comedy, and I love working, like getting into the nitty gritty of jokes and stuff. But my favourite kind of comedy is the stuff that shouldn't work but does. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, no, absolutely.
Yeah, and I always try and like there's certain like rules for joke writing and stuff which they only work until they don't work. You know what I mean? So and it's like almost trying to find that limit of like, well, what if I did that so much it made it go this? I don't know. I can't really explain it, but
no, yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, it's another. I may have said this in a previous show, so apologies to anyone who's said this before. But another comedian gave me this. I don't know if it's advice or kind of mantra. There's like every rule of comedy and every rule of joke writing has an asterisk next to it. In the sense that, there are identifiable, and there are things you can be taught. There are ways you can. Because I don't particularly agree with the idea that you can't be taught comedy. I think you absolutely can. But yeah, I think the complication is if you're just kind of learning and memorizing all the rules and just trying to recreate that, there's only so far that can take you. And I think that's very much particularly the more you do and the more you write, the more you kind of certainly my experience is that it does just get kind of tedious, and then you start thinking your own jokes are predictable because you can predict your jokes because you wrote them, so you're just trying to like surprise yourself in a way. I don't know if that makes sense.
That's a really interesting point, Johnny. Yeah, because I think again it's a bit like the next stage after imitation is almost like familiarity. So it's like I know what my jokes sound and feel like, so I'm going to try and do more of that to establish like, oh, that's my style. But then the downside of that is then the audience become aware of what your style is, and you need to upset the rhythm and stuff. You know what I mean? So, that's a really good point, I think.
Yeah, I just
your point, not my point.
That's right. I just realised you're slightly cut off from the stream, so I'm just going to quickly fix that.
I keep moving. It's my fault.
That's all right. There we are. That will do. Fab. I've not even started looking at the questions. I prepared for this. Yeah, I got too distracted in conversation, so I'm just going to kind of take it back now to kind of basics. So, I guess the first question is when is it that you first became interested in comedy as a consumer, as a member of an audience? So not even necessarily stand up, just the first time you realised that comedy was something that you enjoyed.
I don't really know. I think I can't remember not being interested. I remember I had a friend, weirdly, I think a lot of people, they get into things through their either older siblings or older friends that they like. But weirdly, I had a younger friend. It was literally like 1 or maybe 2 years younger than me when I was growing up. And he was really into like British comedy. So we're talking like sort of late 80s, early 90s. And so I was like 10 or 11 and he was like 8 or 9. And he was watching like Filthy Rich and Cat Flap, Bottom, Young Ones and stuff like that. And I didn't even understand it. Like I found it funny when someone hit someone with something. I found it funny when someone, was violent, but I didn't get any of the social context or anything. I didn't get that they were anarchists or students, you know what I mean? Like, and I obviously didn't get like, what was the one, the one that Rick Mail did where he was like a prime minister, not prime minister, a minister. Was it? New Statesman. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm not even kidding. Like, I swear, Tom, like he got it. He knew what that was about. I didn't, but it was there in my, and it was going in, but I didn't necessarily process it. And that's the first memories I have of watching comedy. Is he would like because we lived in Northwich near I don't know, you know where it is probably, but I don't know if your audience. But so he would like get the bus into Warrington or Chester to buy like a VHS box set of his favourite comedy shows because there was basically no way you could buy them in Northwich. And this like as like a 10-year-old, it's crazy. Like I don't know, but yeah. So that's my first memory is Tom always watching comedy stuff and me observing it but not really understanding it. But I think sort of relates to something I was going to say earlier, but I forgot to, was that I think there's no... You were talking about going to watch gigs and stuff. I think there's no gig watching or performing that you can't learn something from. It sounds a bit grand, but I think
absolutely, yeah.
it all goes in. Like, even just like, it's like you'll see like a bad act that does well because something just gels, or like a really good act and something falls flat. And all these little things are going in all the time, and you're learning from them. So, they just delivered that bit just a bit too quiet, or a bit too short, or a bit too long, and a bit too loud, a bit too quiet. And it all feeds in and informs like how you do your thing, I think. So yeah, that like I suppose in a way, I haven't really thought about this, but like my comedy is quite silly, and I suppose maybe you could say that my formative like comedy understanding came from things like British like slapstick kind of comedy and silly stuff like 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 Red Dwarf and like I honestly swear down my favourite comedy show when I was a kid was the British Empire. Like most people don't even remember it, but like I absolutely loved it. Like I liked it more than Red Dwarf, but I loved it. So I think I would say that was when I sort of became aware of comedy, was through British TV sitcom stuff in the late 80s, early 90s, probably.
Yeah, and that was kind of, I mean, in many ways that was kind of like a golden period for the British sitcom. Not all of it is aged particularly well, but certainly like the kind of between like the early 80s and maybe like the early to mid 2000s, that kind of era of British sitcom was absolutely huge. But I mean, for people who grew up in Britain anyway, I don't know how well all of it travelled internationally, because some of them tried to and it didn't work that well. But others did it a lot better. So that's quite. And it's interesting that there's the slapstick comparisons you make, because I mean, one of the things. I mean, which I think applies to your act, and I think any comedian who does anything sort of that could be described as kind of as kind of deadpan, is the thing that slapstick does very well in playing the ridiculous seriously.
Yes,
which I think like because there's not a lot of, and I think this is the thing that applies to a lot of scripted comedy, is like when the characters don't like when they're not finding the things funny. Like I mean, like they're playing it very, very kind of sincerely, and that's always a thing I've admired and never quite been able to pull off, because I'm terrible at I am a terrible corpser when it comes to comedy acting.
There was I had this idea that I wanted to sort of like pitch for radio about like a docu-series sort of thing about. I called it like My Favorite Moron, and I think basically about like. The history of the idiot character in comedy, and it's in pretty much anything. I was trying to think of a sitcom where there isn't an idiot character, and I couldn't do it. Like every sitcom, it's like Friends, you've got Joey, and like however mainstream, or like
I think more recently
they've like Nathan Barley. There's always this moron like that. Yeah.
Like I think more recently they've kind of given the moron a bit more agency and kind of not redemption, but like they've kind of made them a bit deeper than they were. But I can't think of any sitcom that. I can't think of any that doesn't have that kind of. I suppose it goes back to kind of like Court Jesters and that kind of thing, to use that old wanky comparison. But it's just and even more just going into like kind of clowning theory and all that, which is a whole other. We've already had a long conversation about that with Katie, and I don't have the energy to do it again. But that's. It is, that is. It's one of those things that like I never really think about, but now that you've sort of brought it up, I'm like, no, actually, I can't think of any sitcom, like no matter how different they are, that doesn't have that character.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's something that's like, you can be intelligent and be an idiot. You know what I mean? So it's nothing to do with intellect. You know, it's just like cluelessness. You know what I mean? So like, obviously. I'm not a fan of Graham Linehan, but like the IT crowd, like Moss is clever, but he's a moron. You know what I mean? Like he's an idiot. You know. Yeah. So they're always kind of there, that character.
You know? And like, this is the only time we'll be praising Graham Linehan, but that is a thing that his works are really good at. Like, I meant to like Father Ted because I mean like Dougal's the idiot, but they're all idiots. And it's another thing like. what's his name? Chris Morris as well. Everything that he's done, he's really good at that. Like of making everyone the idiot. Four Lions is an excellent example of that. Even the ones that are more intelligent. Like there's a kind of archetypal kind of stupid character, but they're all
sure.
but yeah, though they are all a bit clueless. They've all got that in them, and that's I feel like the best comedy works. Certainly in Britain, all have that. That'd be really interesting to kind of view more into that.
Yeah, I think. I mean, when I think, dare I say, what works about my act. I think. I mean, my character is quite specific. Let's say character is more a persona, but
yeah.
I think what makes it relatable is that everyone in some situation feels like the idiot. So it could be at work, I'm like, I'm always the last one to put my hand up in meetings. Or like with your family, it's like, I'm not very emotionally open. Or, I think everyone has a situation where they don't think they're the best. Like they're like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I think that makes it a specific character that is oddly, I think, very relatable and broad, because we all have a situation where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like, and I think on a surface level, people are laughing at me, but I think, again, not to sound too wanky, I think we're laughing at ourselves because we all try our best to appear our best, and we get it wrong.
Because like a lot of your jokes that I remember are the ones that like. Because again, it's that kind of slapstick thing that they are delivered very sincerely, even though like the way the joke works is that your persona has completely misunderstood a particular situation, but there's like an earnestness in that delivery, and I think as you're saying, some people watching that can be going, oh yeah, I can think of a time where I've confidently misunderstood something. Yeah, I don't have a point to make after that. I just wanted to say, I just wanted to kind of
that's all right. No.
Back up your point on that. So we've touched on this a little bit, but I want to kind of dive more into it. So yeah, you kind of talked about the fact that the kind of comedy you do isn't necessarily the comedy you like, and I find that really interesting. I find that I find that applies to a lot of people who I've chatted to. So I just kind of ask, who were your original kind of comedy influences? Who did you want to be when you started doing comedy?
When I started, 100% Zach Galifianakis. Like I used to just sort of watch. I used to watch his SNL monologues and watch his stand-up specials, because that was. I know it sounds ridiculous as a cis-het, white, bearded guy, but that was the nearest I'd seen to what looked like I would do if I was a comedian, if you know what I mean. Yeah. So I was like, I want to be like, and almost because of that, it's like, but I'm not like every other tattooed bearded tattooed guy. Sorry, like I want to present myself in a different way, and that was the first thing certainly that I saw as like, that's kind of what I envisage what I would want to do with my comedy, and I think part like crush, part like idolization. I just wanted to be like Zach Galifianakis, and I used to, I definitely, when I was, I think, so my persona developed over a longish period, I would say, and I think it still is developing. But when I started, I was basically just doing a Zach Galifianakis impression. I even used to dress like him. I used to wear like a polo shirt with like a blazer over the top of it, and like, and I had this very, very deadpan, like almost like to the point of being like really serious and earnest in a kind of deliberately like wanky, arrogant way, and that was 100% imitation, and then I felt, I think everyone goes through this process. As much as a good impression I could do of that, it was an act. It was, that's the right word. It was an impression, not an act.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Which is subtle, different, And so it wasn't my act. It was a very good impression of someone else's act. For them, based on their personality and experiences, So, and even though my persona is, obviously a massive exaggeration, obviously not meant to be real. It's even that said, it's still a lot more me, doing an impression of someone else. Like, okay,
yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. Because I mean, yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about comedy personas, because I feel like that they are like, because people do just tend to assume that all comedians are like what they are on stage, which isn't necessarily true. But I do think there is like, unless you're deliberately doing a character, it is within something from you. I think even if you're doing characters in a lot of ways, you could probably reverse engineer that back to who the person is who does it. Certainly, if they created the character themselves.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to me that it was my wife that said this, actually, that she said my persona is almost who I would have been had I never sort of like gone away from my hometown and met new people and had new life. So it's almost like, and I think interestingly there is a massive nostalgia kind of like aspect to what I do, and I think it is almost like me looking at myself and revisiting myself when I was younger, and like making fun of myself, the things I took seriously, the things I didn't get, you know. So it's almost like, you know, I don't know, like a weird form of self-reflection. Strange.
It's really funny you used to mention that, because I it's one of those things. I don't know if this is like a common experience across the board, but one of the things I find myself thinking about whenever I'm like trying to go to bed, all my mind's just wandering, is just like going back to all the times in school where I tried to be funny and it absolutely didn't work. And that's like stuff that like if I tried to bring it up to any of the people who were there, would be like, I've literally stopped thinking about that the day after you said that stupid thing. But it's one of the things just keeps it moment. It's like every time anyone sarcastically said to me, anyone said to me, I used to be a comedian, after saying something that categorically was not funny.
It's funny that made me think of it.
Yeah, and I guess I'm always trying to kind of prove myself to those people who absolutely do not know I exist anymore.
That's really interesting. I think that's fascinating. I think because there was I always like say that the first time I feel like I made a joke, like performed a joke, wasn't on stage. It was like when I was at college, I went briefly to like a really fancy sixth form, and they had like a boating club type thing. And one day we were in like a class, and a note was going around to say like it was being cancelled because of the rain, and I just said, "What's the matter? Are they afraid of getting the boats wet?" And like no one laughed apart from one person. But weirdly, I think I'm not trying to find those people. I'm trying to find the person that did laugh. Do you know what I mean? Like,
no, exactly.
Like, I'd rather someone find it really funny than everyone think it's okay. Do you know what I mean? Like, so like he couldn't start laughing, and everyone's just like, "Why would you say that?" You know what I mean? And that's kind of weirdly, again, like I say, it's almost like masochistic. Like I almost dare myself to do jokes that might not work, because if they work, they'll really work.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get that. You'd much rather have
you've got to sell that.
Yeah,
you've got
like
10%
of the audience really find it funny, and 90% of them hate you. It's
because
I absolutely love being in audiences when that's happening, because I'm usually the 10% that finds it really funny. And that's one of my favourite. Like the more comedy I've done and the more I've watched, my favourite thing is watching a weird alternative act in a non-alternative night where the room's really divided on them. That's my favourite comedy environment to be in. Which is might be a little bit might be like a little bit mean, because I would hate to be that comedian in that situation. But just like where there's like 4 or 5 of us absolutely pissing ourselves at it, and just everyone else just looking kind of bemused. That's like my favourite comedy environment to be in.
It works the other way too, and I think this is why no kind of comedy is easy or anything, because if you see like a quote-unquote mainstream normal act at an alternative night, all their conventions of what comedy should be and have learned to be correct, everyone's like, yeah, no, that's the joke. You know what I mean? Because I was expecting, so, and slightly off topic but similar, I was thinking about how from my own experience, Schadenfreude doesn't really exist within comedy for me, because even if there's an act I really disagree with politically, if I really don't like them personally, when they're on stage, dying, there's no pleasure in watching that because I've been through it. Do you know what I mean? So it's really sort of taught me empathy.
Yeah.
That's because I don't think I'm naturally very empathetic, but from doing comedy, I've been like, I don't take any joy in watching someone I don't like fail because I know what it's like, you know.
No, so, I absolutely hate it.
I'm not trying to sound really virtuous or anything. I mean, I really mean it. Like, I don't. I wish I could. Like, be like, you failed, but I don't. No, but I might have that twins, but then very quickly I'm like, that was hard for you. You know what I mean? Like.
No, I totally get that, and I can't enjoy watching comedians not do well on stage. Like if the same comedian does well and I don't find them funny, that's not much better to me. But certainly, I wouldn't prefer to watch them not do well. Like that,
sure.
that feels just really uncomfortable for everyone. I think the only time that deaths can be funny is if. In those gigs where kind of everyone's dying and there's that kind of solid like you've all just decided to just have fun with it and you're being like they absolutely hate this but we just might as well have a good time with it. And
it's almost appreciating how ridiculous the whole thing is. Like
it is,
we are here stood up saying words to make strangers laugh, and there's something when you die it's kind of like. Almost like that's the reality of comedy. It's like, it's just weird and stupid.
It really is, yeah. But there's still this kind of like unwritten social code that they all have to none of them can just like stop and none of them can walk out. Like if they walk out, that would be really rude. So like depending on the gigs you're doing, obviously if you're doing kind of gong shows where they're generally a bit kind of rowdy, that's a bit different. But in like most comedy clubs, most people will still kind of stick around even if they're not enjoying it. And it's just, I don't know if that's more a British thing as well. I don't know how that would compare abroad, but... I
really don't know. Yeah.
No, it's an interesting one.
But yes, I think that's a really interesting point that, like the comedy, not just humour, but comedy culture is different places, even within countries, you know.
Yeah.
But, is that you'll find in London, generally speaking, audiences are a bit more... comedy savvy, as it were. So they're but the downside of that is they're not necessarily as reactive. So somewhere like generally up north, I feel like I get a better, more immediate reaction. But sometimes, generally speaking, northern audiences can be a bit more rowdy and interruptive. But not necessarily in a negative way. But I think there's like a north-south divide even with a comedy.
I guess it kind of links into that whole kind of...
It sounds like I'm being negative, and I'm not, because like my favourite gig in the whole country, like hands down, is Excess Malarkey, you know, and that's in Manchester, you know. But what I'm trying to say is that I think sometimes I try and actively seek like a comedy audience because some of what I do is playing a bit with the conventions of comedy.
Yeah.
But sometimes you want an audience that doesn't know what you're doing because then it's a more real reaction. They're not like, I appreciate this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's not what I want, you know. But I want them to try and appreciate it. There's like a sweet spot in the middle.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Have like your kind of Easter egg for the comedy savvy people in your sets, but like not so much that you've completely taken like the actual comedy out of it. Yeah, absolutely. Some really good points there. Kind of going back to so when you were talking about your early gigs and how your persona has changed since then, I want to kind of drill into a bit more of the actual content of that. So obviously, your persona you said was like completely different, but in terms of like your actual joke writing and joke structure, how has that changed since you started, or is that broadly the same? Do you reckon?
Largely similar. I think I've got better at doing what I think is funny, not what I think people will think is funny. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
It's a bit like the imitation thing. It's like wanting to do stuff that you think the audience will find funny, which obviously is the ultimate goal. Yeah. But I think the best way to do that honestly and interestingly is by making yourself entertained by it.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think when my writing has become more confident often and individual, I think, and it's hard to sort of like see a tangible difference, but I think there is one. I think also something I used to do is I used to specifically write jokes to show the audience how much I got comedy. Like, it sounds wanky, and it is.
No,
I was trying to like convince the audience that I knew what I was doing.
Yeah,
because I didn't have natural. I don't have.
Yeah, it's weird
natural
how
performance like skill.
I was going to say it's weird how.
Like,
it's weird how like once you actually do know what you're doing, you stop doing that. It's interesting.
100%, and I can see other people doing it, and I don't, mark them down for it because I know that's what I went through, and it's like, it's showing, because you want to, because half of comedy is like convincing the audience enough to be comfortable to trust you.
Yes.
That you know what you're doing.
It is, yeah.
So if you can find a shortcut, do a joke that shows I get comedy actually, then it's a very tempting line to like go through,
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, so I think I used to do a lot of that to show that I knew what I was doing. I think in a way, callbacks can be done very well, but often a callback is a way of almost like a lazy way of showing the audience that you know how to write comedy. Like
it is, yeah.
I'm not saying it can't be good. I've heard so many good callbacks, but sometimes, and again, I've been guilty of this, where because I don't try and write them, so if one comes up naturally, I'm like, right, I've got a callback. It's like, well, so what? Like, it's a bit like, if you're a musician, like, I accidentally played that note and it made it a -7. It's like, well, yeah, fine, but did you want to do that? Is that does it sound good?
Yeah, but, exactly.
My music theory isn't very good. That was probably really weak analogy.
That's fine.
But yeah, it's like it can become a bit masturbatory, is what I'm trying to say. And I think again, I'm not trying to put anyone down that does that. It's a very, very broad, big subject.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a very important learning tool as well. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that is an example of the type of comedy that you can do as a new act to convince people that you're more experienced than you are.
Yeah.
Because as I say, like, it's 90% confidence, 10% like material, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
And this is coming from someone whose act is 90% material, 10%. Because that's the thing I had to learn, is I wasn't naturally confident. And as well as, kind of going back to the start a bit here, but as well as imitating Zach Galifianakis when I was new, I think the other thing was I was willfully putting a wall between me and the audience. So if I was deadpan and serious and earnest and they didn't laugh, it didn't matter because I was creating this impervious persona.
Yeah.
And I think I learned that was just a way of me dealing with failure rather than that's a conscious artistic decision.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's really interesting because I've done the exact opposite for the same reasons. One of the reasons I'm so energetic and loud is for those exact same insecurities. It's just a way to kind of defend myself. It is a defense mechanism. So it's like if I don't stop talking and if I drown everyone out, then it doesn't matter if they're not laughing because I'm still like the center of attention. Basically, I'm still the one here.
I get that, and I think there's also an element of like fancy dress the comedy where you get to be the person that you either want to be or not necessarily. You can play a villain, but
no.
And I think that is why. Again, we could do like a whole 3-hour discussion of this separately. Why sometimes comedy attracts people that want to tell it like it is, because it's their opportunity to have the mic and have to say.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that kind of comedy can't intrinsically not be good or done well, but it can attract a certain type of person, usually male, that it's like, this is how it should be or how it is, and that's all. It can be very funny. Arguably that is what Stuart Lee does. Like he's
it is.
He's presenting his view of the world sarcastically and ironically and so on, but there are subtler and more interesting and more nuanced ways of doing it than the kind of lectury, shouty style. Which is, again, artistically speaking.
Well,
fine,
I think that's kind of like the previous generation of Stuart Lee imitators is the kind of like Bill Hicks and George Carlin imitators, that kind of like throughout the kind of 90s and early 2000s. I think that was a huge part of that. And I definitely fell into, not necessarily stylistically, but I guess in terms of my kind of mantra to comedy, I definitely kind of fell into that at one point, which is ridiculous because I didn't know anything. So which I think is a lot of new acts, and I think a lot of acts now could probably look back and go like, yeah, no, I definitely tried to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm sort of very, very poorly paraphrasing a famous philosopher, but it is like the longer I've been doing comedy, the more I realise I don't know. You know what I mean? Like I thought, and that leads into the whole like what I was saying when you try and show, I get comedy because I'm making this type of joke or I'm making this reference to this type of thing. The more I've got into comedy, I've realised, and also linking back to something else we talked about, the asterisk things. It's like, yeah, that rule works until it doesn't. You know what I mean? So. There's jokes.
I mean, like, Oh no, you go on.
No, it's okay. But there's the joke of mine where once I kind of, there's some things that are instinctively come with your writing, and other things you learn from advice and reading. And one of them was that like you always try and use the reveal as the very last word or very last phrase, And I've got a joke where I was like, okay, that would work better if I moved that to the end, and it just didn't. It worked better earlier in the setup. Not in the setup, but earlier in the punchline.
Yeah.
And on paper, that is wrong. Like, you never do that. You always put it at the end, the reveal. But somehow, putting it about 4 or 5 words back, it just works better because that's how people speak.
Yeah.
So it's like...
Yeah.
I find that more fascinating than the rules, is like when they don't work, which sort of links back to the whole, like, comedy that doesn't make sense but works.
This is going to be like a really wanky comparison, but like it is kind of like, because I mean, like, you can say that comedy isn't like an exact science, but in some ways it is, because a lot of what science is establishing the rules, and then when something breaks it, try to change the rule to incorporate what's broken it, rather than being like, well, that can't work, that's not what this tells us.
No, Johnny, you're absolutely right. That was really wanky.
Yeah, it was.
No, I completely agree with you. No, that's really interesting. Because, yes, the process is that with new information and new knowledge, we change what we think about this. Yeah. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's that whole kind of... I think one of the joys of comedy for me, particularly... like what I sort of have to remember and remind myself whenever I'm feeling a bit disillusioned with it is treating every gig like a bit of a learning experience. Like, no matter how good I get at it, I have to having more fun when like I treat it much as an experience for me to develop as it is for the audience to enjoy. And obviously the audience should enjoy it. I'm not saying that you should do comedy just for yourself, but I do think the audience tend to enjoy it better the more fun you're having with it. And I think that's a way to kind of... It's a way that I found stops me getting bored of my own sets. Is like, even if I'm doing the same kind of material, it's just paying attention to what's happening around the room, which is a difficult thing to do early on because you're so full of nerves. It's sort of paying attention to how people are responding, and then just kind of curating it, and then like you say, just like moving one word a few words back or forward, seeing how that works. If like maybe it should work better, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And I feel that's one of the things that keeps me engaged in comedy is, and going back to what you said before, that it is. I forgot the point I was going to make there, but it essentially that you realise you know less and less the more you do it. Like, so even though you're learning more, you're learning about you're also understanding that the picture's bigger than what you thought.
Yeah, so, I'm gonna out-wanky you now, Johnny.
Oh,
because,
do it.
I think a large part of comedy, and this is why I think instinctively I don't like right-wing comedy, because a large part of comedy is vulnerability and humility, and like not being like, I'm better than you. And you can do comedy that's like, I'm better than you, and that the joke is that you're not or whatever. But I've lost my point. I'm so sorry.
I think I get where you're coming from in terms of like right-wing comedy. How like, generally right-wing politics don't lend themselves to that kind of humility in the same way, because it's all about kind of these are how it's done. These are the rules. That kind of.
Yeah, I think yes. You've helped me get back to it. Yeah. So if you think you know comedy, that's when you're the furthest from having this real experience with the audience, because it becomes mathematics rather than chemistry. Do you know what I mean? So This plus this equals punchline. It's like, oh, but if this bit is a little bit too much, and that bit's a little too less, equals no punchline. And I think if you're vulnerable and honest and open, that's more conducive to a real comedy experience than this is comedy, this is how it works, and therefore you will laugh. I don't think I'd made that very clear, but
no, I absolutely get it. And because there are comedians who are very kind of mathematical with it. I mean, we're talking about Jimmy Carr a bit. I think before we actually started, before we actually went live, and his thing is very much that he is. Because I only get he's got some pretty terrible jokes, and there's a lot of reasons to not like him. But but listening to him in interviews, he is a very formulaic, mathematical. But because he came in it from banking or something, didn't he, or accounting, I think. And that translates. His jokes are very, very methodically put together, and that has its own merit. I think it's important to learn that. But I also think that's a bit of a detriment, because you can kind of tell that in his act. It's got less personality, and I think he tries to compensate for that by just doing the really offensive stuff.
Yes, that's interesting. Yeah, so I was going to say that I think that makes sense within the context of his act, because that is who he is. He is a clinical, But it was like what I was saying about putting the wall up. So it's almost like I wonder if he says these things to break out of that, almost to give it more of an edge. Because he's this flat, monotonous, ostensibly kind of a dry, boring guy, and it's like, oh, I'm going to shock you by saying something shocking. So I'm not the straight banking guy you think I am, right? Maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't profess to know.
It's interesting. I don't want to just talk about Jimmy Carr for the whole rest of the stream, but I do think it's
because you're doing the special next week, aren't you?
Exactly. But no, I do think it's interesting how his when given a presenting role on TV where there's obviously more rules, I think he has a lot more personality than when he's doing his stand-up specials. I don't know if everyone would agree with that, but and I feel I don't have the answer to why that is necessarily, but
Well, it's also something that is relevant to what I do as well, because with one-liner it's hard to have personality because it's very clearly you're telling a joke, and that's kind of one of the reasons why I have the persona, is because like anything ever, fashion is a part of comedy, and it's one-liners aren't cool right now. They haven't been for a long time, and so even if they're really good and really clever, really funny, whatever, people's instinct is to be like, no, that was a joke, which is bizarre, but I get it. And so half of my act, my persona and my development in comedy, has been trying to convince the audience that I'm in on the weirdness and the crappiness of it. You know what I mean? Which is hard, because then sometimes it goes too far the other way, and people, I had a run of really bad gigs for the weeks ago, and what it felt like, I'll never know, but what it felt like was the audience looking at me like, you don't know how weird this is. And I was like, no, I'm in on the act. Do you know what I mean? I think they believed it too much.
You can never convince them that once they thought that.
It was, so there was this disconnect. I was like, no, I'm in on it, and then I couldn't show that because then I'd break the persona. It's like, so it's kind of hard.
I feel that's one of those things that like I've seen a few comedians do when they're trying to experiment with more kind of persona character driven stuff. Is when they're trying to do the character as someone who's bad at comedy. Is that as soon as someone doesn't get that that's a character, you can't come out.
It becomes real.
Yeah, you're then just someone who's bad at comedy, and it's like it is possible to pull off, but like you can't win people over once they've gone off with that style.
I don't know. Have you ever seen Jack Tucker, the character act?
I don't think I have, no.
Incredible. It's one of my favourite shows I've ever seen. So his real name, or at least his performing name, is Zach Zucker, and he's American. And he does this act. It's a bit. When I say this, people are always like, "Oh, like Neil Hamburger." It is sort of, but basically, he plays a deliberately bad stand-up.
Yeah.
And it's what's I find so fascinating is I recommend him to people left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
And there's so many people where I've like, oh, you'll love him, and they've come back and been like, it's so bad. Like, why do you like that? And I'm not saying they don't get it. I know that they get that he's playing a bad comedian, but they don't find any humour in that.
Watch,
like,
no, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a bit like I kind of get it because I get frustrated when people that don't do comedy criticise comedy because it's like it's very easy to stand at the sidelines and shout you're crap at this when you're not doing it, you know, and that's fine. Everyone has the right to that, but there's an element of that. It's like it's a bit like what I was saying earlier about the snobbery thing. It's like, oh, you have to know comedy to get why this is bad comedy, which is why it's good comedy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Like, no, it is.
So it can be a bit navel-gazing, you know, but I love it. It just works for me. I like it because it's laughing at comedy.
It is,
And it's so funny because all the freedom of speech people, like the only thing that they will not accept criticism on is their own comedy, and it's like
no, they won't.
You shouldn't be allowed to make fun of comedy and comedians. Like if you're going to go down that road of like everything's up for grabs. But that's
freedom of speech means I'm allowed to say anything, but no one's allowed to criticise me. That's
100%. But yeah, that's what I enjoy about it. It's like it is ridiculous. Like I was saying earlier, it's mad. We stand up there and we say stupid things to people we don't know to make them laugh, to make them. Hello, Pitch. So there's a pigeon just landed on the balcony.
I thought you just called it a bitch, or as you said, Pitch.
No, Pitch. Yeah. No, Pitch is the seagull.
Oh, right, yeah.
I think I enjoy watching. Yeah, it's holding a mirror up to stand up almost. It's like we do these stupid things to make people laugh, and that's no different. Doing an impression of a bad stand-up is no different to doing an impression of a good stand-up.
No,
but like subconsciously.
No,
this is what we're all trying to do, you know. So,
yeah. That's what. Oh, that's fucking existential for right there. We're all just trying to do an impression of a good comedian. Yeah. Wow, I'm gonna be thinking about that for the rest of the week. We've gone on for it's getting on for 8 now, so. I guess we'll start finishing up. I just want to draw attention to Safi Bish Lasagna's comment in the Twitch saying Southerners have no sense of humour. Absolutely. No, I absolutely don't. Okay, so I guess, just to wrap it up, I think I covered most of the questions I'd planned without actually asking any other questions, so thank you for being so thorough in your answers. But yeah, I guess the last question I want to ask, and we may have already covered this as well, but what advice would you give to a younger you starting out doing comedy?
Don't worry too much about it.
We're just going to stop after don't. Just don't do it. Just get a proper job.
No, and I would give that. And I am the worst for giving out advice and not taking it. It's the same now. I would say today. Don't worry about it. I get so bogged down in like what other people are doing and like and you know and again, it sounds very grand, but like I think that's what happened to Andrew Lawrence. Like he got bitter. I don't think he necessarily believes the things he says. I think a lot of like alt-right people don't. I think they are so angry at themselves and the world that they just want a reaction. And it's a slippery slope. I'm not saying I'm in danger of that happening, but when you're focused on why other people are getting what they don't deserve, you're not working on yourself, you know, and that's what it comes down to, I think. I think my advice would be don't stress about what everyone else is doing, just enjoy yourself. And that's good advice for anyone about anything, really. But
that is, absolutely. It's really
but I think I've sort of like, I think what I've told myself is that if I'm not actively speaking up about things, I'm not doing anything and I'm being passive.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily the same as actually doing positive things to change things. Do you know what I mean? Like complaining isn't necessarily activism, but yeah.
No, yeah. That's really nice. Lovely.
To give a perfect, no, I'll give you a really quick soundbite. Like the perfect example of that is recently I was kicking off about a gig where it was all like, it was 10 acts, it was all white blokes, right?
Yeah.
And I was chatting to someone that was from relatively near to where that gig happens, who was a woman, and they said, "Mate, don't worry about it. We don't want to do that gig. It's terrible." So it's like, so I went in there with this assumption that these people were being denied this opportunity, and they were like, "We don't want.
No, yeah,
that's not an opportunity." Like, so yeah, there's definitely. I'm not saying it's wrong not to point these things out.
No.
But it's also important to understand the bigger context as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, wonderful. Well, all of William Stern's links are in the chat. Have you got anything coming up that you want to plug, or anything I've not included there?
I'm just going to assume that most of your fan base is based in the Northwest, so I'll just say that I'm in Manchester in November. So I'm doing the 6th of November, I'm doing A Lovely Time, Amy Gledhill and Chris Cantrell's gig, also known as The Delightful Sausage.
Yeah.
I'm penciled to do your gig on, I think, the 7th of March.
Hopefully, I've not officially announced any of those live dates yet, but hopefully
that's
that,
fine,
yep,
yeah.
hopefully that will go ahead. Also,
and then on the 9th,
for context, Safi is London based. If you've got anything there as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So an informed source on the humour then, definitely,
Yeah.
And then on the 9th, I'm doing Excess Malarkey.
Lovely.
The Red Ship. So,
yeah, absolutely. So we will doubtless be shouting out that near the time. Thank you very much. Yep. Give him a follow on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and his website's there as well if you want to have a look at that. So yeah, thank you for chatting with us today, and we'll